Hello everyone, and welcome to Full Fathom 5. My name is Frank, and today we'll be talking about the two different endings to Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. Just a warning, this video will contain spoilers to the endings of both the novel version and the theatrical version of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. So recently I had the opportunity to attend a theatrical version of And Then There Were None at my local theater, and I loved it. That reminded me that when Agatha Christie was writing the play version of her 1939 novel And Then There Were None, she opted to change the ending of the original novel to make it more palatable to her audience. Now, there are multiple reasons given for her choice to change the ending of her novel in the play version. In her autobiography, she said she changed the ending because she thought it wouldn't be possible to stage a play in which every character dies at the end. Obviously, she had been thinking of Hamlet. So she decided to change the ending so that 2 of the 10 characters are innocent and are able to get together and have a happy ending. The other reason given by my play program and other places online is that because the play was being produced during World War II, Agatha Christie wanted to cheer people up and figured they didn't want to see such overt brutality on stage. So what exactly are the two different endings of And Then There Were None? Well, the setup of both are the same. 8 people are invited to a remote island off the coast of Devon. 2 are already there as the butler and cook/maid for the elusive billionaire who owns the island. So these 10 people are invited to the island under false pretenses, assuming that they knew or vaguely knew the person who was inviting them to the island. It turns out, over the course of the first dinner on the island, that they've all been lured there under false pretenses because of crimes they have supposedly committed. They're confused because some of the people admit to the crimes while others deny them, but if one person admits that the crime is true, why should the other ones be false? Over the course of their time, their guests begin to die, and the guests seem to die in accordance with the nursery rhyme, which is hung above the mantelpiece and throughout the mansion where the guests are staying. And the original nursery rhyme has an overtly racist title. The version I read was also changed to a less racist title, 10 Little Indians, and now it goes under the title 10 Little Soldier Boys, and also the island has changed with the names of the nursery rhymes used in each rendition. So in each version, the guests keep dying until they're down to 2 people supposedly left on the island: Philip Lombard and Vera Claythorne. In the original novel version, once the body of Dr. Armstrong washes up on the shore, Philip Lombard and Vera Claythorne, who both suspected him to be the killer and that he was alive and only hiding, realize that it must be one of them who is the killer, and where they both had some sort of fleeting romantic attachment or attraction to the other, they both realize that the other must be the killer. So Vera gets a hold of Philip Lombard's revolver and kills him in accordance with the next verse of the nursery rhyme. As she returns to the mansion, she begins to have vivid hallucinations of the crime that she committed for which she was called to the island. And as these flashbacks play in her head and she walks into an empty room of the house, she finds a noose ready for her in a stool, and so then she hangs herself in accordance with the very last verse of the nursery rhyme. However, this is not the exact end of the book. Then there's an account of people coming to the island and finding 10 corpses there, and then finally there's a postscript which purports to be a message in a bottle found by a fishing boat nearby the island. The transcript is by one of the previously thought to be dead guests, Justice Wargrave, outlining how he succeeded in his crime, because so before, when people got to the island, there were 10 corpses, and so he had committed the perfect crime, but being the egomaniac that he is, he couldn't resist outlining his crime to somebody. As you can well imagine, staging a play involving everyone dying and no one knowing how they died until they find a message in a bottle could be problematic. In the theatrical version, everything remains the same essentially, up to the point where Philip Lombard and Vera Claythorne find the body. And so, essentially, in this version, Vera does shoot Philip, but it doesn't prove to be fatal. And as she shoots Philip Lombard, Justice Wargrave comes out of the shadows and locks all the doors and basically tells her, very briefly, because this is a play, how he committed the crime. He essentially starts to force her into the noose, but as he's doing so, at least in the version I saw, Philip Lombard, who's laying on the ground, starts to move, and so at the last moment, Vera holds Justice Wargrave somewhat improbably so that Philip can shoot him. Also different is that Vera Claythorne and Philip Lombard's stories are different. Essentially have the same accusation from Justice Wargrave, but as they're confronting each other, realizing supposedly the other is the killer, they both admit that they were not guilty of the crime for which they were accused. So this drastically changes the story. Supposedly, Agatha Christie was inspired in her new ending for the play on an alternate ending to the nursery rhyme, in which the last soldier boy gets married and then there were none. So the changing of the two endings is relatively simple, and yet I was intrigued in seeing it staged. My own reading experience with And Then There Were None is an unusual one at best. My first exposure to And Then There Were None was in 8th grade when we did a strange project called a pull-apart novel, in which the teacher literally mutilated a paperback book like this so that each chapter was put into a Ziploc bag. If the specific chapter had not survived intact, it was Xeroxed, and each student in the class was assigned one chapter, and their task was to summarize the chapter, draw a picture of it, and then present it to the class in chronological order. And the idea was that by the end of the class, we would have gotten essentially the entire summary of the book. Yet the odd thing is that no one person in the class would have read the entire book. Also, the majority of the class would have only a partial idea of what was going on. So I guess the idea was to work on our summary skills and other skills in dealing with most of us having fragments of a book which we didn't know what was happening before or what would happen after. I was considered lucky because I got chapter 1, though in chapter 1 we're introduced to each of the 10 characters in rapid succession, and it's a relatively long chapter and can be difficult and somewhat slow to a first-time reader. So I had the odd experience of knowing the entire story in great detail without having actually read the book. When I read the book a few years later, I remembered who the killer was, but it was still interesting to see how it played out. Also before that, I had watched the 1945 movie adaptation starring Barry Fitzgerald, which features something like the theatrical ending, and I don't remember it that well. I actually forgotten that the ending was different, and so did my parents who watched it with me. However, watching that didn't really change my view of the book. I also watched the recent 2015 adaptation, which stays relatively faithful to the book. It had some weird, unnecessary stuff to the plot, and it also includes a little bit of the Justice Wargrave ending, where even though Vera Claythorne is guilty of her crimes, he appears and kind of tells her his entire plan after she hangs herself and is kind of hanging there, and yet not dead that, and making very disgusting choking noises as she hangs there. The staging of the production I saw was very interesting. The entire play took place in one room, which was essentially supposed to be the main drawing room of the mansion, in which the 10 characters come to stay. And I was curious how this would work, because that would mean essentially that each of the killings have to take place in front of the audience's eyes without them realizing what's going on. And it did change some of the plot. Obviously, the exposition at the beginning kind of took place with each guest arriving almost one at a time and kind of giving some brief dialogue about themselves to the characters around them. And in that way, there's a really kind of quick and well done introduction to each of the 10 characters on the island. Also, for each of the victims, if you're familiar with the story, there's a statue representing each of the 10 soldier boys, and as each person dies, their statue gets destroyed. And so in the book form, as I just checked, the first statue is noticed by the butler, Rogers, and it's kind of kept quiet, and it isn't until later on that they notice that as each person dies, the statue is destroyed. However, in the stage adaptation, when the first victim dies, Anthony Marston, the statue falls almost of its own volition off of the mantelpiece where the statues are. I think it's on the dining room table in the book version. And so I think that was for dramatic effect, so that the audience is immediately aware that the statues symbolize each person. However, that also intensely focuses the audience's attention on each statue, so that when a statue is necessary to be used as the murder weapon, we're paying attention to them. So I think that the director or whoever staged it made sure afterwards to kind of spread out the statues and also kind of clump them together, or maybe have some taken off stage without the audience realizing, so that we weren't able to count each one. Also, some of the murders took place in much closer succession than in the book, so that there were times where there were not enough statues on stage, and it's because the murders were happening so close together, where they were revealed one after the other. So that's why there were 2 statues missing for so much of that one scene. I also like that they introduced each act of the play by having each of the 10 characters be illuminated by a spotlight to show at the very beginning that there were 10, and then after each act showing which of the 10 guests remained. Also, the pacing of the play was interesting, and I'm sure this is due to Agatha Christie's adaptation of it. But the first act ended with only one of the 10 victims being killed, and yet I could hear people in the audience around me, and I felt the same way, that the act had gone by rather quickly, and yet there were still 9 people left to go in the next 2 acts. The next act, I believe, 3 people died, and then I think in the final act, that left 6 people left to be killed. And I think that the pacing worked, because even though, like I said before, Act 1 seemed to go by rather quickly. The increasing number of bodies piled up kind of helped to heighten the sense of anticipation. And really, I guess I should say that in the last act, only it wouldn't be 6, it would be 4 people who died since, like I said before, Philip and Vera survive. It also leads to the way that the ending was staged in this version. Throughout, I kind of felt that the love relationship between Philip and Vera was played up much more than it was in the novel. I think in the 2015 version and probably the 1945 version, this was also the case. But I think that I think the romance was played up more, at least in my opinion, in the stage version because of the ending that it was working toward the whole time. I know now that Agatha Christie's company produces a version of the script that is faithful to the novel's ending, but in some ways I think that doesn't work because I think that Christie wrote the play with that ending in mind, and that's why she played up the romance between the two. Now, in the version I saw, like I said, Vera suspects that Philip is a murderer, and so she shoots him. And unlike the Barry Fitzgerald version, I don't think there's any collusion between them. She didn't plan, as far as I could tell, to miss. In the book version, it says that she shoots Philip right in the heart, and in this case, obviously, she couldn't have hit him right in the heart because he survives afterwards. But it also didn't seem like there was a collusion between them. It seems that she shot him out of shock. At least that's what I thought the first time I saw it. Then when Justice Wargrave appears, it was almost comical how the actor did it, unfortunately. And I think that there were some chuckles from the audience when he kind of appeared and was like, "This is my show!" It explains what's going on. And it was kind of strange. How was he going to make Vera hang herself in this version? It kind of seemed that he was going to force her to, and it would have been violent to actually watch someone do that, even obviously in a stage form. So that ending wouldn't have worked anyway. In the 2015 movie version, Vera hangs herself before Justice Wargrave comes, and even that's somewhat implausible because she should be dead after she hangs herself, unless she did a really bad job, in which case then she wouldn't have died, or would die a very slow and painful death. So anyway, once Justice Wargrave has Vera on the stool, or I think it was a table in this adaptation, to be hanged, she notices that Philip on the floor begins to twitch, or at least the audience notices that he begins to start moving. So I guess perhaps they could have had some collusion off stage beforehand when she shot him. But anyway, she kind of signals to him for help, and like I said before, then she kind of grabs Justice Wargrave's body, and he doesn't seem to fight her off, even though he probably is stronger than she is. And so she turns him towards Philip, and he shoots Justice Wargrave. And even that was kind of implausible because wouldn't the bullet have possibly gone through Justice Wargrave into Vera? But she survives. The summaries I saw say that then Vera and Philip are able to go get married. And yet in this one, even though Philip says, "It's all right, darling," he kind of seems like he's been shot. The wound seemed to be in his abdomen, and so I guess that might not be fatal, but it kind of seemed like he wasn't doing too well. And the script also kind of played around with the rhyme where Philip, he seemed to joke a lot more in this than in the book or movie adaptations that I've seen. And so he kept playing around with the rhyme, making silly versions of the nursery rhyme. And so then Vera takes it up by saying, "Two little soldier boys who can't be undone," and then she throws the 2 statues that are remaining and says, "And then there were none." Which I guess in some ways works, but in other ways it doesn't, since apparently this was based on an alternate ending of the nursery rhyme, so I don't know why she didn't say that. Also, the spotlight was only on Vera's face when she said that, and not on hers and Philip, so it kind of seems to show that she was the lone survivor. I also didn't realize that the stories of Vera and Philip were changed, that Philip, even though he was accused of leaving, I think it was about 30 natives to die, he was innocent. He left them enough provisions and everything, and he happened to escape. And they were unfortunate not to escape, but it wasn't through his fault that they all died. Additionally, in this version, the man that Vera loves, I'm not sure if he was her fiance or not, but he's the one responsible for letting, I believe it was his half-brother, swim out to sea and drown, where in the novel version, the original version, it was Vera who's responsible. And so she takes the rap for him, and that's why she's accused of the crime by Justice Wargrave. And even though these seem like small changes, psychologically it changes the entire plot. It would be kind of impossible for Vera to hang herself in this situation. Obviously in the book she hangs herself from guilt. In this version, as we can see even in the way the actress portrayed Vera, it was almost physically impossible for her to go towards the news. She was still fighting for her life because she knew she was innocent. It would be more, I guess, of a martyrdom in that case if Justice Wargrave had succeeded in killing her. But yeah, that was a really fun experience for me to watch this version of the play and to kind of see in some ways a new version of it, because I kind of forgotten about the fact that there might be an alternate ending. And it's kind of cool because now if you see the play, you might have the novel's ending or the original ending written by Agatha Christie. And in some sense, both ways are Agatha Christie's endings that she wrote. The novel version, also she was the one who wrote the play version. And for me, I kind of see them as 2 parallel universes. Since in the book version, Vera and Philip are both guilty, and in the play version, they're both innocent. And also, the book was published in 1939, which means that on November 6th, 2019, it will turn 80 years old. So hopefully, I'll get a chance to reread this book for its anniversary, maybe do something else cool for it. Have you read the book or seen the play or movie adaptation of it? What do you think of the different endings? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to hear more from me, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you all for watching. I hope you get a chance to take a break from YouTube and read a book today. Bye.